Thanks for coming back. You're watching Holy Land Uncovered. Throughout history, the Judean Desert has been an important place. It was the main entry route to Jerusalem from the east. But unlike the ever-political city, the desert has also provided quiet and tranquility. This is why monks have formed some of the world's most spectacular cliffside monasteries in the desert. Here's the first part of our journey there. The Judean Desert. It's one of the world's smallest, and yet it's unique and full of mysteries. What is it in this area that makes people travel hundreds of miles just to be alone? Throughout history and even in modern times, people came here to find solitude. But only a few wanted to be so isolated that they made this desert their home. Some Christian monks found the desert a suitable place for seclusion. This follows the desert theology of the Old Testament, where the Israelites wandered for 40 years in the desert to change their natures and their hearts. The monks were also following in the footsteps of Jesus, Elijah the prophet, and John the Baptist. The first known monastery in the Judean Desert is called Faran, only a few miles from Jerusalem. Moish, this breathtaking valley here, what we here call a wadi, captures the beautiful combination between fresh water in the spring, green, and desert view. And this is the place where the first monks, Christian monks, who wanted to isolate themselves, came to.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, just imagine when Prophet Elijah, when he was a kid, used to go down exactly to this area, to this spring, with his friends. Later on, he was sent again on a mission from God. And on the footsteps of Prophet Elijah, this is where the very first monk came, especially here. He came from where we now, Turkey, back then in Asia Minor. His name was Hariton.
Hariton became a source of inspiration for many other pilgrims who decided to live a life of solitude in remote areas of the Judean Desert. This tradition continues until today. Moish, we just hiked all the way up here and we're not even there yet. How can people live here?
First of all, there's only one. His name is Hariton. He's a Russian monk. He's isolated. Since the 90s, he is here all alone. And he feels great because he's under the inspiration of Jeremiah, close to the water. I'm sheltered and isolated by this majestic cliff.
One of those inspired by Hariton and who followed in his footsteps was a student, Saint Euthemius the Great. In 420 AD, he decided to continue the same pattern at a different site and established the Laura of Euthemius between Jerusalem and Jericho. A major challenge was to get access to fresh water. Euthemius overcame this obstacle by using an underground water cistern.
The only fresh water can be dependent on is the runoff, rainwater. There's no one slide of a spring here, okay? So the story tells us that in the time of Euthemius, when he was the father of the monastery, they had lack of water. There was no water. It was drought. And the monks started asking, what are we going to do? There's no water. And they were thinking even about sending some donkeys over to the former wadi we've been before, Wadi Kelt, which has few sources of water, a few springs, permanent springs. And he said no. And he prayed to the God, and all of a sudden rain and flash flood came down, and all of a sudden he realized that here we have a runoff water. That's how come we can solve the solution. We got a solution by digging, having a reservoir, a cistern like this, which is all carved in the stone.
However, as opposed to other similar sanctuaries, the Laura of Euthemius did not survive. It is now an archaeological site in the heart of an Israeli industrial area. Unlike the places that we visited earlier today, why is this one abandoned?
This was abandoned because, first of all, as different from where we have been before, which has, natural cliffs and natural protection, this is open space. And it was, first of all, invaded by the Persian as the others, 614, and later on 638, 640, again by the Muslims. And there was no need anymore for this particular site rather than the others that people seeked more isolation. Here, this was abandoned and not used for hundreds of years.
Our next destination is St. George's Monastery. The cliff-hanging complex was established in 480 by John of Thebes and was dedicated to Elijah the prophet. Monks believe this site houses the cave where Elijah was fed by ravens. Moish, what's the story of St. George Monastery?
Well, the story of St. George or Mar Giris from Chuziva Monastery starts in the 5th century AD. We're talking about the Byzantine era or the late antiquity. Well, this area was wild, isolated. At 440 approximately, the first 5 monks came from the desert of Syria, which was back then, beside the desert of Sinai and Egypt, one of the main centers of monasticism. And they came here in particular in order to be as close as possible, in one hand, to Jerusalem, which is about 1 day walk only, and in the other hand, a couple of miles from here to Jericho, coming here based on at least 2 traditions. One is connected to the Bible, the book of Kings, where Prophet Elijah is about to escape from Ahab and Jezebel. And naturally, he escaped to the desert on his way to Horeb, to Mount Sinai. And he found isolation here. And the other reason is connected to the tradition, hint in some of the Christian sources, about the fact that Prophet Gabriel came to Joachim, the father, supposedly the father of Saint Mary, and he tells him, don't worry, your wife is going to be pregnant.
Today, only 10 monks live at St. George's Monastery in Wadi Kilt in the West Bank. The compound is totally isolated, disconnected from electricity, the internet, and other facilities we take for granted. But Moish, many people have faith. Why do certain people choose to come here to the desert, isolate themselves in such a way to practice their faith? Isn't it a radical step?
Definitely a radical step. If I were to be a monk, I would have definitely chosen this spot.
I can definitely see you doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Almost done it. Anyway, first of all, it's not far from Jerusalem, and it's close to Jericho. Second of all, it is access for whoever wants, like me, whoever wants just to seek shelter and peace, peacefulness, quiet, to be away from the civilization. There's supply of water. I can get water from the spring. I can sit in the cliff. I can get together and sympathize with Jesus. That's why I sympathize with my former fathers, like the prophets.
What really lies inside these beautiful monasteries is a secret known only to a few dozen people. They apparently are not looking for the reason why they are here. For them, the question is, why not? Amazing, isn't it? And I can promise you that we're not done with the Judean desert yet. As mentioned before, this was only the first part of our journey there. There are more breathtaking monasteries in this area. And now a short break, but stay tuned because our next guest is a very interesting and controversial figure, an Aramaic Christian priest who faces a lot of criticism for his so-called Zionist activity. Father Gabriel Nadaf will be here, and also we're expected to get to know a mysterious special community here in Israel called Iman. It started in London in the 70s, so don't go anywhere.